If you are spending hours and hours studying, using the same techniques and getting nowhere, then please stop. This does not work. So if your studying techniques right now are getting you nowhere or you're not being successful with them, then I highly encourage watching this video. Hello and welcome to Learn with Jess. I am Jessica and today I'm going to take you step by step through 3 studying techniques that will help you become more successful as a student. The techniques I'm going to share with you are all brain-based, meaning they work with our brains, they will help us manage what we're learning, and we will feel confident in these techniques. So before we start to study, we really have to be aware of our studying environment. So before you sit down to study, you're going to look around and think to yourself, do I feel comfortable in this environment? If we think about environment, it is extremely important to us as human beings. For example, real estate agents will stage an entire house just to get buyers to buy it. They want them to walk in and picture a place they want to actually be. If you go into a market or a store, they'll often have music playing and nice smells and all the nice things up front. Again, this is an environment that says, hey, stay here, you want to be here. So I would say environment is one of the most important parts of beginning to study. So you don't want a lot of books sitting around, you don't want things stacked high, you don't want trash everywhere. So take 5 to 10 minutes, clear up an area, get an area you really feel comfortable. If that means lighting a candle, or if that means even making your bed so that you're not looking at a messy bed, whatever you need, make sure that your environment is going to set you up for success. The second most important thing before studying is checking in with yourself. When I teach yoga, this is often weird for people to check in with yourself, but really, you're the one who is going to be studying, so you have to make sure you're ready for that. You are going to ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I tired? Do I feel safe? Right? These are the foundational pieces to us being able to do anything. So if you're thirsty, make sure you have a water bottle nearby. It's always a good idea just to stay hydrated anyways. And for me, I always had some type of healthy snacks. So I had apples and peanut butter, or often I had nuts because nuts have high fat in them and they're good for your brain. Your brain consumes the most glucose out of any organ in your body. So we really need to feed our brain before we begin to study. Another thing I did to set myself up for success was to either have a coffee or a tea, depending on time of day, so that I was in the mindset that this is going to keep me focused. I also want to include in here, if you are really tired, it's probably best to just take a quick nap and worry about studying another day, because realistically that's not going to work for your brain and your brain is going to feel very tired and nothing is going to stick. All right, let's jump into study technique number 1. It's going to be note card. About a week or 2 before your exam, you should be given a study guide. If you were not given a study guide, I would go through your book and look up the important definitions, dates, anything that you really need to know. Note cards are great for things that have black and white answers or only one answer. So you're gonna write the word or the thing you need to remember on the front, and then you're going to write the answer on the back. For example, if I have a test coming up on cells and I have to remember what mitochondria is, I'm going to write on the front mitochondria, and then on the back I'm going to write energy producer. Realistically, you are not going to remember the definition word for word. So you want to have a quick idea of what that definition means. So I put energy producer. That is what basically the definition means, and then when I go to take the exam, as long as that's in one of my answers, I know that I'm going to understand what that definition is. So I have my note cards already. I'm going to spend just one day putting all my note cards together and putting them to the side. So the next thing I need to do then is have some type of way to be accountable of when I'm going to study my note cards. In the description, you will find that I have created a study planner if you choose to use it. The nice thing about this is it has daily planning and weekly planning. So once I have my note cards set up, ready to go, I'm going to write at least 3 times a week that I am going to be practicing my note cards. So in my planner, I'm going to make a goal and I'm going to write out when I'm going to exactly sit down with my note cards and practice. I'm going to give myself anywhere between 10 to 30 minutes to run through my note cards. The nice thing about this is if you get started with these early, you won't have to spend a lot of time on them. So now that my note cards are finished, I'm going to sit down and actually practice them. I'm going to read what's on the front, for example, mitochondria, and then either out loud or in my head, probably both, I'm going to then say, what the definition of that is. And I'm going to continually go through these. Now, there's going to be definitions that somehow just click with you. So you're going to put those off to the side because realistically, you don't need to go through those as many times. Then you're going to put the ones that you struggle with in another pile. And those are the ones that you're going to hit the most. It's always good to review the pile you already know, but you don't have to spend a lot of time on them. So let's say there's just one definition that no matter what you do, you cannot remember it. So if you watch the Goldbergs on season 8, episode 8, Barry talks about how he gets such good grades, and he's telling his sister that he makes a rap for everything he has to remember. This is actually brain-based. Our brain works by building connections to the real world, such as smell or anything that is relevant to me. So if something is just not sticking, I can find a couple ways to work through this. One, you can have it in a poem or you can have it in a rhyme. So for example, let's say that I cannot remember that mitochondria is the energy producer. What I'm going to do is pick some type of rhyme. So for example, I'm going to do London Bridge. So London Bridge is falling down, falling down. I'm going to then add in mitochondria. Mitochondria is the energy producer. And again, it's not perfect, but at least when I'm sitting down to take the test and I somehow can't remember, I'm going to have at least that connection to draw on. Another way to do this is to connect to something that's real in my life. So let's pretend that my Aunt Mary has a lot of energy. She goes for jogs, she teaches fitness classes. So I'm going to remember Mary has energy, mitochondria energy. So that's connecting to something in my real life. So again, those are a couple ways that will help your brain make those connections. So let's say I've been practicing my note cards every other day. I feel pretty confident about them. I can start decreasing the times that I am actually practicing my note cards. So you may only need to do it a couple times a week now at this point because you pretty much have it down packed. Great. So you're going to take off some time of practicing note cards. Now, it's the day before the exam. I would run through your note cards at least a couple more times before the exam, not the day of the exam. So that way you just have that nice review in your head. Let's move on to study technique number 2. How do I go about using my textbook? So if you have material that you need to read, make sure you are reading it ahead of time. If you are trying to cram in lots of chapters, you are not going to be successful. Trust me, I have been there, and it usually does not end up being very good because I'm already stressed, I'm overwhelmed, and I have to cram all this information in my head, and realistically, your brain does not work that way. So how are you going to use your textbook? As you're reading, there's a couple options to do this. If you have bought your textbook, you can highlight in your textbook. In some of my classes, I got a digital copy so I still could highlight, or you can just write out bullet points of important information. If you are highlighting, I highly encourage that you annotate, which means small notes on the side. When I was a teacher, if we were reading any article, I always had my students annotate. So if I'm annotating, I'm just writing a small note. So for example, let's pretend it says mitochondria is the energy producer in the cell. I'm going to highlight that statement and I'm going to put on the side energy producer. I can do this throughout my book. So I'm actually going to show you some examples of how I annotated in my graduate classes so that way I felt prepared before the exam. Or you can always annotate by, again, writing bullet points during your reading. So you're just writing quick bullet points. So you're still annotating the text, but you're just putting it on a lined piece of paper or an online document. So that way you're still physically writing notes of what you are learning. The reason I encourage this is because that is how you are going to study. So when it comes time for your exam, about a week or two ahead of time, you are going to plan out a time you are going to be reviewing your annotations in your book. So you are going to review the annotations. You're going to then read at least the highlights in the chapter or the summary at the end of the chapters that you need to review. But you do not need to go back and reread the entire chapter. Because you read the chapter ahead of time, you're ready to go for the exam. So again, you're going to take your study planner and you're going to write out when you are going to study your notes from your book. I would encourage you to do this at least 3 to 4 times a week from 10 to 30 minutes. So you may do your note cards on Monday and Wednesday, and then you may study your book notes on Tuesday and Thursday. I understand that a lot of us have busy schedules. So if you have a busy schedule, I would highly encourage you to run through your note cards first and then go into reading your annotations on your book. If you have made it this far in the video and you find that this has been valuable to you, please make sure you give this a thumbs up so other people can see it, and you subscribe to my channel. The last and final technique is going to be studying your lecture notes. There's a couple of ways that I'm going to discuss how you can write out lecture notes. Sometimes my professors would actually provide me with the PowerPoint that they were going to present. So I would go onto PowerPoint, and there's a way that you can have lines on the side. And so you're printing out their PowerPoint with just a little portion of it being the PowerPoint, and then the rest of it is for notes. So as they're presenting, I'm writing notes along with their PowerPoint. I obviously can't always do that, but make sure that you are recording the lecture. Most of your phones have a recording feature, so you can use your phone. I had an actual recorder just so that it was separate from my phone, but I would sit in class and I would have my recorder on. That way, if the professor's like,
"This is important, this is going to be on the exam, you need to know this,"
I can write down those specific times that my professor said those things. So that way when I'm studying, I know, okay, I need to review it at 15 minutes because I didn't get everything they said. And most of the time when I wrote down the times that they had said those things and I went back and reviewed, a lot of it I had missed. So make sure that you are doing the recording. Now, I will say that studies are kind of half and half. Some people do really well with just listening for big chunks of time and then summarizing their learning. Or some people do better if they write notes during the lecture that are, again, short bullet points. You do not want to try to write out everything they are saying. So let's say the instructor is saying that, so for example, I had a history teacher in college one time specifically say,
"Don't let anyone tell you anything different, but the Civil War was caused because of slavery."
So I'm going to write that in my notes because that felt like something powerful that he wanted to insert. And guess what? That question happened to be on the exam. So you'll find things that you find are important during the lectures, and your professors should be pretty good about letting you know what they also think you need to know is important. So now that I've taken my lecture notes, I am also going to study them throughout the week. I would say spend more time studying your lecture notes than your book annotations. So you are going to, again, put in your study planner when you are going to actually study these lecture notes. All right, so I shared these 3 techniques. Now I'm going to talk about leading up to the exam. So the exam is just right around the corner. You've been studying your note cards. You have been rereading your annotations or kind of skimming information you still need to review, and you've been studying your lecture notes. About 2 or 3 days before your exam, you are going to sit down, you're going to read your annotations and your lecture notes, and you are going to summarize that information. This is going to help you compile all the information you already know and that you have been working on. That way you also have an idea of what you still need to review. Then as you go back and you reread your summary, you're going to also read it out loud. You are going to decide how comfortable and confident you feel in this information. So if there's anything that you need to go back and review or ask your professor about, you can know ahead of time. Now, research does tell us that our brains can only focus for so long. So for example, if you do not have a study habit, you probably can't focus for more than 30 minutes at a time, and that's normal. So you want to give yourself that space to know it's okay if I can't focus anymore, I'm going to come back to it tomorrow. However, since I had been in college quite a long time, I could study for hours at a time because I had really trained my brain in practice. With practice makes progress, and this is completely true. The brain is a muscle, and because the brain is a muscle, we can train our brain. So you are going to be spending 2 weeks studying between 10 to 30 minute increments, so at this point you can study a little bit longer before the exam, or you can break it up in a couple of days. That's personally probably the best choice. Now you may wonder, why can't I just study the day of? Well, research says that our brain makes our memories while we sleep. So if we study a couple days really well before the exam, our brain is going to have time to process that information and connect it. If I study the day of the exam, 1, I'm going to be overwhelmed and anxious, 2, I'm not going to remember anything, and 3, it's not going to stick. So here are some of my tips to make sure that your studying is going well. As I mentioned, you want to make sure that you have a plan of when you are going to be studying. If you happen to have a day that you weren't able to study, something came up, you're tired, you don't feel good, you can write that in your notes that you can cross out. I did not get to read my note cards, but I'm going to make time on Friday. So this helps you be more accountable. I personally like to physically write out what I'm going to do, but again, this study planner is also digital, so you can just type out what your plan is. Then I also have a checklist here of things you absolutely have to get done. So you might write on your checklist, I am struggling with 5 of these definitions. Once you hit those, you can check off, I'm good to go. I now know all these definitions. On your checklist, you might write, I need to speak to my professor. I'm still really struggling with this concept. So you're going to put speak with professor. So this checklist gives you an idea of what you need to really work more towards. And lastly, I have 2 different types of lecture notes to help if you want to have this more of a packet for those studying times. And again, if you don't want to have this, you can always just use a lined piece of paper or a calendar, completely up to you. The more you practice studying, I promise you the easier it gets over time. Just like anything else, it takes time to practice. These techniques might also feel kind of weird at first because they're new. Give yourself a chance to feel comfortable with them. One way I connect this is if you've ever worked out for the first time, you're really sore because your muscles are doing something new, right? And then eventually you're not as sore, or again, you push yourself more at the gym and you get sore again. That is kind of like what studying is going to be like at first. At first, you're going to feel weird. It's going to feel like a lot. And then you're going to get into this routine that works for you and your brain, and it's going to be easy. If you stick to it and you push through, I promise you it will be very successful in the end. Studies show that it takes 21 days to build habits. So I want you to mark on your calendar when you started implementing studying skills and see how you feel after 21 days. Give yourself that time. In the comments below, please let me know, did you find this helpful? What are some techniques that you want to do or that you already do? If you are still wondering about different techniques that you can do as a student to be successful, check out my video, How to Get Straight A's. Next week, I will be releasing a video on how to take exams. I'm going to talk about some techniques and some ways that you can go into taking an exam that will help you feel successful. Well, I will see you in my next video, and I hope you have fun studying. Bye.